My name is Gloria Donnell, 35 years old. I never thought a single follow request on social media could make my hands shake. But when I saw his name, Ezra Whitlock, the man who once burned my life to the ground, every bone in my body went cold. 10 years of silence, 10 years of rebuilding, 10 years of trying to forget. And suddenly he was back, asking to see our child, the child he abandoned, the child he demanded I abort, the child he insisted wasn't his, the child who never got the chance to exist. But before I get to that, I need to start at the beginning, where I was young, lonely, naive, and utterly unequipped for the hurricane that was Ezra. Back when I was 24, I had moved across the country with my best friend to a brand new city. New job, new apartment, new everything. I had imagined a glamorous, fresh start, a big, bright adult life. Instead, 6 months later, my best friend got her dream offer back home. And I encouraged her to take it. I told her we'd be fine, that we'd still talk every day. But the truth was, she was my only anchor there. When she left, the silence in that apartment felt like its own kind of punishment. 2 weeks later, Ezra walked into my life. He was charming in that disarming way. Messy hair, crooked smile, eyes that looked like they were always on the brink of laughing or crying. He said he'd just ended a long relationship. I remember thinking we were mirrors of each other, two broken people trying to stitch a new life together. He bought me soup when I had a cold, carried my groceries upstairs, learned how I liked my coffee. Within a month, he was sleeping over every night. Within 2, he was practically living with me. He was studying engineering back then, in his last semester after switching majors 3 times. I used to sit at the tiny kitchen table while he worked on assignments, the sound of his pencil scratching across the page becoming strangely comforting. We both started to imagine a future, one where we might settle near the city where his family lived, half an hour away. If I had known how much their presence would poison everything, I would have run the other direction. But hindsight is cruel like that. The first major warning sign came at his graduation. That was the day I met Cassie. Cassie, the girl next door who grew up with him. Cassie, whose mother was best friends with Ezra's mother. Cassie, who had apparently dated him since they were teenagers, and seemed to believe she still had some silent claim on him. She showed up to his graduation with his mother, clinging to his arm like she was the one dating him. She smiled at me like I was the waitress accidentally intruding on their family table. She called him Az in this soft, territorial tone. She even wiped an eyelash off his cheek while he blushed and pulled away, barely. I told myself to ignore it. I was raised to be polite. And Ezra kept saying that ending a lifelong relationship was complicated, that he didn't want to hurt her by cutting her out too fast. I nodded and swallowed my jealousy and tried to be understanding. What I didn't realize was that my understanding would later become the weapon used against me. For months, Cassie was everywhere. Family dinners, barbecues, random drop-ins. She always seemed to have an emergency that required Ezra's help. A flat tire, a broken cabinet, a spider in her bathtub. Every time, Ezra rolled his eyes privately and called her obsessive, but he always helped her anyway. Then came the proposal. Ezra proposed to me the very same day he found out Cassie had a new boyfriend. He didn't tell me that until years later, but looking back, it's a puzzle piece that fits too perfectly. He didn't even have a ring that day. He just held my hands, trembling, and said he couldn't imagine life without me. I thought it was romantic. I thought his impulsiveness meant he was overwhelmed with love. I said yes, of course I did. A year later, I walked down the aisle believing I was marrying the love of my life. My family traveled across states to attend, and I was ecstatic to introduce them to everyone. The only person Ezra had met from my side before then was my stepbrother, Sebastian, who had visited me earlier that year. Sebastian and I were extremely close. We grew up like twins, despite not sharing blood. He teased me, stole my fries, hugged me too tightly, and defended me fiercely. Cassie noticed. At the wedding, she wore a white dress and danced with Ezra just as much as I did. She kept glancing at Sebastian and me throughout the night. Later, I found out she had whispered to Ezra's mother that Sebastian and I were oddly affectionate. But on that day, I ignored it, like I ignored every other sign. For 2 years, I downplayed every red flag. Each time Cassie inserted herself, each time Ezra prioritized her over me, each time his mother compared me unfavorably to her, I convinced myself love required patience. Then I got pregnant. Ezra had always talked about wanting a big family. I thought he would cry from happiness. Instead, the first thing he said was, She said this would happen. I remember standing there in the kitchen, holding a positive test in my trembling hand, stunned. I asked him what he meant. He refused to answer at first. Later that night, he finally broke. Cassie, he said, had warned him. She told him Sebastian and I were too close, that we had been secretly in love, that the only reason I moved away years ago was because Sebastian had gotten a girlfriend. Cassie told him the hugs at the wedding were romantic, that the photos were too intimate, that the way Sebastian looked at me wasn't brotherly. And since I had gone to visit my mom and Sebastian a month earlier and returned pregnant, Cassie insisted the baby was Sebastian's. I laughed, at first. But Ezra didn't. I showed him my medical dates. I offered a paternity test. I cried. I begged him to come to his senses, but nothing worked. He left that night. When he came back the next morning, his eyes were dead. Abort, he said, or we divorce. I chose myself, and I chose the child. I moved back home to my family. He signed away his paternal rights without even verifying the baby's DNA. And in the months that followed, the stress devoured me. My body didn't survive the trauma. The pregnancy ended before it ever really began. But I never told him. Years passed. I rebuilt. I met Grant, who loved me quietly and steadily. I became a mother to his son Spencer, who shared my red hair so perfectly that people often assumed he was mine by blood. I adopted him, and my life finally felt like something soft and safe. Until 2 days ago. That was when a friend messaged me. Ezra's been asking about you and your child. Then came the follow requests, the LinkedIn profile views, the private accounts with his name misspelled. The first message, I need to see my son. I made a terrible mistake. Please. And just like that, a chapter I thought was dead began clawing its way back open. I stared at that message for what felt like hours, my chest tightening. My past hadn't just returned. It had come looking for something that didn't exist. I didn't tell Grant immediately. Not because I wanted to hide anything from him, but because the moment I saw Ezra's message, something inside me snapped back into the frightened, powerless girl I used to be. My throat tightened, my chest constricted. My body remembered fear before my mind did. For a full day, I pretended nothing had happened. I made Spencer's breakfast, packed his school lunch, kissed Grant goodbye before work, moving on autopilot like someone pretending to be me. But Ezra's messages kept coming. I know you're reading this. He deserves to know his real father. You can't keep hiding him from me. I won't stop. Each one longer than the last, each one bleeding into the next. Every time I blocked him, a new account appeared. Finally, late at night, when Grant and I were brushing our teeth side by side, my hands started shaking so violently that my toothbrush clattered into the sink. Grant turned, eyes wide with concern. Gloria, what's wrong? I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sat on the edge of our bed, took a breath that felt like swallowing glass, and finally told him everything. Not the abbreviated version he'd always heard, bad marriage, painful divorce, but the truth, all of it. The charm and love bombing. Cassie's shadow always slinking behind us. The white dress at my wedding. The accusations. The ultimatum. The way Ezra refused every fact, every test, every plea. The way I begged him to just listen to me. The way he looked at me like I was trash beneath his shoes. And the miscarriage. I had never spoken it aloud to anyone, not even to my mother. But when I said the words to Grant, they came out raw and trembling. I lost the baby because of him, because of everything he did. Grant didn't interrupt, he didn't question, he didn't recoil. He sat beside me slowly, almost reverently, like sitting next to something breakable. Then he wrapped his arms around me, held me against his chest, and whispered, You should never have gone through that alone. The dam inside me broke. I cried into his shirt until it was damp. He kept stroking my back, murmuring, I'm here, again and again, like a mantra meant to rebuild the parts of me that had crumbled years ago. When I finally calmed down, he gently lifted my chin. What's happening now? What made you tell me tonight? So I showed him all the accounts, all the messages, the ones where Ezra said he had every right to his son, the ones where he insisted he was done being ignored, the ones that hinted he would keep escalating. Grant's jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. Gloria, he's not stable. I know. And he thinks Spencer is his. I know. He exhaled sharply, pacing for a moment as if trying to burn off the anger before it ate him alive. Then he said something that both comforted me and terrified me. I won't let him near our son. Our son. He said it with absolute conviction. Spencer may have been born to another woman and another man, but Grant had always counted him as ours. It made what came next even harder, because Ezra didn't stop. If anything, he became more determined. By the end of the week, he had created 7 different accounts. Every time I reported them, he made more. Every message was a new angle: apology, guilt, anger, entitlement, desperation. Then one night, one chilling message slipped through before I could block it. "I'm coming to talk in person. Spencer deserves better." I stared at the words until they blurred. A cold wave washed through me, the same fear I'd felt years earlier in that apartment when he told me to abort or divorce. Grant saw my face and took my phone. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me into him and held me tight. The next morning, he insisted we block every account, lock every social media platform, change passwords, and enable 2-factor authentication everywhere. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. And still, it didn't stop. Then came the Saturday at my mother's house. I didn't notice the car at first. A silver sedan parked across the street, windows tinted, the kind of car you wouldn't look at twice on any other day. But as I turned off the engine in my mom's driveway, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. For a split second, panic shot through me. Was he a stranger? A mugger? A threat? Then he stepped into the light. Ezra. My blood turned to ice. He looked older than I remembered, 10 years of life etched into the lines around his mouth, but his eyes were the same, desperate, wild, unsteady. Eyes that darted over me like he was drinking in every detail. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, even though I already knew. "To see my son." My stomach churned. "You don't have a son with me." He took a step forward, hands trembling. "Stop lying. You left with him. You hid him. I had to track down addresses, old shipping records, anything I could find just to—" I snapped. All the fear, all the betrayal, all the years of silent grief erupted like a volcano. "Tracking me? You think stalking me makes you a father? You gave up your rights. You believed Cassie over me. You chose her lies over your own wife." He flinched but said nothing. "You left me alone, pregnant, terrified, begging you to just talk to me, and you walked out believing I slept with my stepbrother? Is that how little I meant to you?" Ezra swallowed hard. "Cassie told me—" "Oh, stop blaming her. You chose to believe her. You ignored the evidence. You told me to get an abortion." His mouth opened, closed, his voice cracked. "She confessed, a few months ago. She said she lied. She said she made it all up. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You want the truth? Fine, here's your truth." He looked up sharply, hope flickering. "The child you abandoned never existed," I said quietly. "I lost the baby, months after you left. My body couldn't survive the stress of everything you did." Silence. A strange, hollow silence that seemed to swallow the entire neighborhood. He stared at me, eyes wide, as if the ground beneath him had vanished. Then I finished him. "Spencer is not your child. He never was. He is Grant's son, and he is my son because I chose him. You have nothing. You left nothing. You lost everything you threw away." My mother and stepfather had come outside by then. Several neighbors lingered on porches, pretending not to stare. Ezra's shoulders slumped. His face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the boy I once loved. Broken. Lost. But it didn't last. He didn't apologize. He didn't leave quietly. He just whispered, almost to himself, "No, that can't be true." And in that moment, I knew something terrifying. He wouldn't accept it. My stepfather stepped forward. "It's best if you leave." Ezra hesitated, just long enough to make my skin crawl, then walked back to his car and drove away. I thought that would be the end. I prayed it would be. But 2 days later, I saw his car outside my house. And the day after that, outside my mother's. Then near Spencer's school. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Ezra wasn't looking for closure. He was hunting for a child who wasn't his. And he wasn't going to stop. Ezra's car lingered like a shadow. Appearing, disappearing, reappearing. Sometimes I'd catch the glint of the same silver sedan in a rearview mirror. Sometimes I'd see it parked 2 streets down from Spencer's school. Sometimes I'd swear I saw it and then try to convince myself I was imagining it. But the fear never left. After the 3rd time I spotted it outside my mother's house, I told Grant. He didn't panic the way I did. Grant rarely panics, but he went stone still. Then he picked up his phone, opened in the camera, and walked outside to photograph the car from multiple angles. "He's watching us," Grant said quietly. "This isn't just online harassment anymore." We went straight to the police. I remember sitting in the small, fluorescent-lit office, handing over photos, explaining everything from the stalking to the confrontation at my mother's door. The officer, a tired-looking man who seemed annoyed by emotional women, leaned back and folded his arms. "So he hasn't threatened physical harm?" "No," I said, "but he's following us. He's watching the school. He says he wants to see the son he thinks is his." "Do you have any children together?" "No," I said, and I told him that. The officer nodded like a man who wasn't listening at all. "Well, until he commits an actual crime, there's not much we can do." I felt my stomach drop. "He's stalking us. Isn't that enough?" Grant leaned forward. His voice was controlled, but there was a crack of rage beneath it. "Our son is in danger." The officer sighed. "Look, I'm not minimizing your feelings." "Feelings?" I snapped. "He tried to get custody of a child that doesn't exist and is now trying to find the one that does." The officer shrugged. "If he hasn't touched the kid or made direct threats, my hands are tied. Just keep your doors locked." That was it. Doors locked. Grant had to guide me out of the station because I was shaking too hard to walk. That night, Grant sat with me at the kitchen table. He reached for my hands, grounding me. "We'll protect Spencer," he said, "no matter what. He won't get near him." But protection suddenly felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Because Ezra wasn't simply obsessed. He was delusional. He believed he deserved a child. And delusional people don't need permission to act. The next morning, I noticed his car outside Spencer's school again. This time, I didn't doubt myself. Our neighbor, Ms. Hawley, taught 3rd grade at Spencer's school. She was kind, sharp, and fiercely protective of every kid she taught. When I told her about Ezra, she didn't brush it off. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't say maybe he'll calm down. Instead, she said, "Give me a picture of him and his car. I'll talk to the principal today." Grant and I immediately scheduled a meeting with the school office. We sat with the principal, the vice principal, and 2 front desk staff members. I placed Ezra's photo on the table. My voice trembled as I described the situation. "If anyone comes to pick up Spencer," I said firmly, "you call me. You call Grant. You call Ms. Hawley. No exceptions, no excuses, no emergencies." The principal nodded. "Absolutely." The staff member added, "We'll flag his file and issue a note to all teachers." For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of relief. But that relief was short-lived. 3 days later, while I was at work, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Call from Spencer's school. My heart plummeted. I answered immediately. "Hello?" A shaky voice responded, one I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Donnell, there was an incident." My blood went cold. "What happened? Is Spencer okay?" "He's safe," the woman said quickly. "But a man came into the office claiming he was here to pick up your son. He said there was an emergency involving your mother." My mouth went dry. What did he look like?" I whispered, even though I already knew. "Tall, light brown hair, about late 30s. He gave the name Ezra." My vision blurred. "And he said you sent him?" "Yes, but when we said we had to call you first, he insisted you were too overwhelmed by the emergency. He became agitated. He tried to convince us not to call." My hand tightened around the phone. "What happened then?" "We stalled him. Asked him to wait while we verified your mother's status. He said he'd call you himself. Then he walked outside." "And?" "He didn't leave. He sat in his car outside the school. He's still there." I didn't even realize I had stood up until the chair screeched behind me. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys. "Call the police. Now." "We are." I hung up and dialed Grant immediately. "He's at the school," I choked. "He tried to take Spencer." Grant didn't ask questions. "I'm 5 minutes away. Drive carefully, Gloria." I sped through every yellow light on the route to the school, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. When I pulled into the school's parking lot, police lights flashed. 2 cruisers boxed in a silver sedan, Ezra's car. Officers were pulling him out of the driver's seat. He was shouting, wild-eyed, viscous anger twisting his face into something unrecognizable. "That's my son," he screamed. "He's mine. She stole him from me. She stole my child." I froze near the walkway as his voice sliced through the air. "He needs his real father. I'm taking him back." My chest cramped with panic. That voice, it wasn't normal. It wasn't sane. It was pure obsession. Grant arrived seconds later, gripping my waist and pulling me against him as if shielding me from Ezra's gaze. One officer opened Ezra's trunk. Inside was a duffel bag. Inside the duffel bag were 2 plane tickets, clothes, a child-sized hoodie, and a bottle of sedatives. Strong ones. The world tilted beneath me. He was going to take Spencer, fly him out of state, drug him if necessary. My knees buckled, and Grant caught me before I hit the pavement. Ezra didn't stop screaming until they shoved him into the back of a cruiser. Even then, he banged on the window, eyes glassy with fury, shouting words I couldn't hear from where I stood. I didn't want to hear them. I wanted him gone. When the car finally pulled away, the air around me felt heavier, not lighter, because a new fear had settled inside me. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning of the legal war. The next months blurred into hearings, statements, evidence collection. The school shared the video of Ezra attempting to pick up Spencer. Police documented the plane tickets, the sedatives, the duffel bag. Ezra was charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, endangering a minor, attempted custodial interference, and several lesser charges. During the trial, I had to face him across the courtroom. He kept staring at me, not with remorse, but with a kind of hollow longing that made my skin crawl. A court-ordered paternity test confirmed Spencer wasn't his. My medical records confirmed the miscarriage. Fact after fact proved what I had told him all along. But he still looked at me like I had stolen something from him. Like I was the villain. Ezra was sentenced to several years in prison. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a quiet, exhausted emptiness. Cassie, on the other hand, felt everything. She showed up at the trial sobbing dramatically, claiming Ezra was being punished for loving too deeply. Her husband publicly left her over it. Old friends sent me screenshots of her social media posts, pages of rants defending Ezra, painting him as a tragic hero. Later, I learned the two of them had rekindled their twisted attachment. Cassie, in some delusional victory lap, sent me a venomous email boasting that she won. I stared at the message for a long time before replying with one sentence. Congratulations on getting exactly what you fought for, a criminal who will spend the next years behind bars. Then I blocked her. Pettiness, maybe, but after everything, I didn't regret it. 2 months later, word reached me. Ezra had been beaten in prison, badly enough to be hospitalized for a week. I felt a sharp spike of satisfaction, followed immediately by guilt, but not enough guilt to erase the truth. Men who target children don't last long in prison. And Ezra learned that in the most brutal way possible. Last week, I picked Spencer up from school. He ran into my arms, red hair catching the sunlight, laughing about something silly his friend said. Grant waved from the car. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the fear loosened its grip. Ezra is gone from our lives. His obsession destroyed him, not us. Cassie got the man she wanted, behind bars, broken, disgraced. And I got peace. Not the perfect kind, not the soft movie ending kind, but the real kind, the kind you earn by surviving.